Hello and welcome to CTV News Across Canada for Friday, May 23rd. We've got the top local stories from coast to coast, stories that affect you and the country. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne and Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem wrapped up the three-day summit of G7 finance ministers and central bank governors in Banff, releasing a shared list of priorities amid complex global challenges.
This week's meeting and today's joint communique will put us on a solid foundation ahead of the Leaders Summit next month in Kananaskis.
Global trade and the fallout of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs dominated the discussions, though Champagne and Macklem refused to share exactly what was said behind closed doors.
Obviously, anything that's impacting the economy, that is something that monetary policy needs to look at carefully and consider. The impacts of a trade conflict, it weakens growth. It can also boost inflation. So, we have to carefully balance those.
It's really about the chaos that the Trump administration has created, yet the ministers themselves can't say too much about it for fear of retaliation.
While in Kananaskis, the leaders discussed artificial intelligence, financial crimes, and the war in Ukraine.
We have reiterated our support for Ukraine against Russia's illegal invasion, including to ramping up sanctions if necessary, and to support efforts to foster private sector participation in the recovery and in the reconstruction of Ukraine.
As the summit ends, those hoping for tangible actions will be disappointed.
I think to a large degree what we saw both in terms of the question period and in terms of the communique that comes out is an effort to put on a good face that, hey, we're all together, we all understand each other. But of course, if anyone was expecting to see any grand solution to the problems, they're going to be a little bit disappointed.
Jacqueline joins us tonight from the Rimrock Hotel in Banff, where that summit has been held. Jackie, one more leader has confirmed their attendance.
Yeah, so the White House has now confirmed that U.S. President Donald Trump will be at the G7 Leaders Summit that is happening next month in Kananaskis. The dates for that are June 15th to 17th. And this really is essential because a lot of the economic woes that are happening right now, not only for the G7 but other countries, is because of tariffs that have been imposed by Donald Trump. Now, on top of the G7 leaders that are going to be there, we also are expecting to see Australia's Prime Minister as well as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Tara?
Okay, Jacqueline, thank you.
As I'm falling backwards, and when my head hit the pavement, you still don't understand what's just gone on.
The victim was walking up Homer on Friday afternoon, aware there was someone approaching but thought nothing of it. Then, when he glanced at his phone,
It felt like I was body slammed or shoved backwards onto the pavement. Oh, you hear a crack. When your skull meets the pavement, you hear a crack.
we've agreed not to reveal his name because he still works downtown and is concerned for the safety of his clients.
And I looked to my left, and the man who had done this was just casually walking down the street towards Penter Street. At that point, I raised my head, and I realized there was an awful lot of blood coming out of my head.
Still on the ground, two Good Samaritans rushed to his side, then took him indoors. When paramedics found a piece of glass at the back of his head, they sent him to hospital for stitches.
We monitor this fairly closely, and what I can tell you is that it's still a problem. It's unprovoked, random, stranger attacks. We're seeing between 1 and 2 a day.
The 70-year-old was carrying a phone in one hand and a credit card in the other. His attacker didn't take either. Later on Friday, police arrested Derek James McFeasters. Court records show he has a long criminal record, including charges of manslaughter and assaulting a police officer. He has now been charged with assault causing bodily harm.
And things like this, there's no reason at all. There was nothing I did to motivate him.
The North Vancouver resident considers himself lucky because he's well aware of all the random attacks, many very close to where he works. He praises the response he got from police and paramedics, but is calling on the federal government for tougher laws and to make it a priority.
There's times where you sort of think about how lucky you are, for one thing, and how much worse it could have been.
St. John Alexander, CTV News, Vancouver.
I was really dismayed. To me, she's not demonstrating leadership.
An opinion of Alberta's premier, this Dragon's Den star is also sharing online. Writing on Facebook, Bill 54 isn't just bad legislation, it's wholly un-Canadian. It's a disgraceful act.
She says she's not a separatist, but she sure is acting like one.
Alberta's Bill 54 lowers the threshold for the number of signatures required to put forward a referendum on independence.
She should be bringing people together and making life better for everyone, not picking fights or using people as pawns.
Dickinson is calling on civic and business leaders to speak out against separation. As a new Leger poll shows, 29% of Albertans support our province becoming an independent country, and 35% support Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and BC forming its own nation.
Albertans are frustrated. They have made and continue to make an outsized contribution to Federation to the rest of Canada.
30% of Albertans polled said the economy was the primary motivation for separating, that number highest at 43% among 18 to 34-year-olds. This policy director understands Albertans' frustrations and believes changes to energy policies are the first step to a better deal.
The two primary ones that come to mind are the oil and gas emissions cap and Bill C-69. That's a great place to start.
I understand some basic economics here, and there's no argument here in which this makes sense.
This economist says emotion, not the economy, is fueling flames of separation, and says a change in sentiment needs to come from the top.
The Premier needs to say very clearly is to Albertans, she's failed us, including me. She has not done a good job explaining to Ottawa, explaining to the rest of Canada what value Alberta brings.
Over half of Albertans asked say Ottawa's actions could influence their decision, with 37% saying federal decisions could sway them to stay. Shaylan Skalski, CTV News, Edmonton.
Devastation all around us.
Leanne Ross Martin and her husband sift through the remains of what once was their summer paradise.
I don't think you ever expect to see something like this. We raised our child out here. He was out here digging through the rubble with us today. His memories are, as much as mine are. It's just devastation.
On Wednesday afternoon, property owners on Wendigo Road were allowed to take a brief look. This wildfire also claimed 2 residents, Richard and Sue Noel. Brad Wood was at a loss for words upon returning to his home away from home.
I look to my left and I see a barren wasteland of forest, and it's still hard to fathom that water there could not have made it over to this forest 100 feet away.
Wood says his neighbor knocked at his door, urging him to evacuate. He said there was little time to react and warn others based on limited cell reception.
You don't have time to go look for your favorite knick-knack or grab anything that you could have possibly thought. It was that fast. There was no time. We had no preparedness, no warning, no advance notice. As you've found out now, there is no cell phone service right here.
The cellular, or the lack thereof, in the dead spots in that area. I certainly understand that. We've been lobbying for years, it seems, on dead spots.
Ross Martin's family built their original cottage in 1967 and then a new cabin in 2019. Now it's all gone.
There has to be a better notification system. There's many things that have to change before we can feel comfortable rebuilding.
How do you clean it? The environmental impacts here are enormous, as you can see. Vehicles, properties.
Questions that will need to be answered for many residents in the coming days, weeks, and months. Joseph Bernacki, CTV News, Lac du Bonny.
Joseph Bernacki joins us now live in studio with more. Joseph, what's next for the community?
Well, Marilee, the RM is hosting a special council meeting as we speak to go over damage estimates ahead of a meeting tomorrow morning with the province. These estimates are expected to be in the millions to go towards the extensive cleanup that will need to take place.
All right. Thanks for this update, Joseph.
In response to protests that have proliferated on the doorsteps of places of worship across the GTA, Toronto Council will implement so-called bubble zones.
My community has never been less safe.
Around some faith-based institutions, daycares, and schools.
This is an additional tool that will help bylaw, will help law enforcement to clear out and protect some of these spaces, particularly around places of worship, which we have seen have been targeted with hate, harassment, intimidation, and violence.
Those are places that children go.
Councillors clashing on whether pushing back some protests.
It comes at such a substantive cost.
Restricts rights.
Spaces
belong to everybody, and everybody has the right to express themselves.
We are creating a system that is going to chill speech in this country.
It doesn't take any rights away. It doesn't take away the right to protest, the right to picket, or the right to free speech. And all it's doing is extending rights to those who want to walk into vulnerable institutions.
Vaughan and Brampton have passed similar bylaws establishing a 100-meter bubble zone around vulnerable institutions. Toronto Council settled on 50 meters after staff suggested 20.
20 meters is literally within the intimacy of the council floor.
A debate scrutinized by stakeholders on all sides.
There's such limited access to power and to politicians that if we take away one of the crucial tools that historically has served, marginalized communities, it's a huge erosion of rights.
In front of a synagogue or daycare or school, kids and people have the right to walk in without being attacked.
Who is going to stand by and who is going to stand up?
Council deciding where the line lies on public protests.
And again, the individual institutions will need to apply for the special bubble zone protection that would keep protests 50 meters back from their buildings. If granted, those protections would be in place for 1 year's time, enforceable by both bylaw officers and the police. At City Hall, I'm Natalie Johnson. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Natalie.
Time is running out for an agreement to be reached between Canada Post and the union representing more than 55,000 postal workers. But once the clock strikes midnight, if no deal is made, all mail and parcel deliveries will once again come to a halt, something we've seen before. For local businesses, November's job action is far too familiar.
Very problematic for small businesses because many of them still rely on the post office for invoicing and letters and the direct contact with some of their customers, and certainly on the packages side or delivery for home-based or online businesses.
Those involved in the negotiations feel the weight of a possible strike too. Yet, Canada Post declined the union's 2-week extension offer on Thursday, saying a further delay is in no one's interest.
Our employees are scared. Our customers are frustrated. They're looking for us to get a deal and to treat this with the urgency that it deserves. Let's hammer out a deal, get this done, and give everyone the certainty they're looking for.
With this being a case of deja vu, United Way Waterloo Region Communities has put some backup plans in place.
And we're talking about uniting efforts and how we can ensure that families in crisis receive the support they need. So we are getting those flyers out we'll choose a household area and we'll put flyers in people's mailboxes.
Local businesses are also ramping up their email and social media communication to ensure their messages get out too.
I think the reality is people will have found ways around from the first strike.
The Postal Workers Union maintains Canada Post's offers don't address wages or cost of living adjustments. There are no talks scheduled at this time, and the current contract expires at midnight. Without a new deal, you can expect to see workers on the picket lines first thing tomorrow morning. Colton.
All right, that's CTV's Karis Mapp reporting live this evening. Thank you, Karis.
Anyone going to City Hall will soon have to walk through these security gates.
Just can't let everybody just walk in because, you never know.
Whether renewing a license, paying a water bill, watching a council meeting, enjoying music, or getting a marriage license like Chantel Simoneau.
I wouldn't say that's a bad idea, but there's a lot of other buildings where, you have to go through metal detectors, and there are important meetings and everything going in here, and, we are downtown.
The city says it's rolling out the enhanced measures because security risks and incidents have evolved over the years.
It makes it difficult for people to go in and do simple things, but that's the sign of the times.
Experts say many cities across Canada have introduced similar security measures at major venues and government buildings.
Concerts have been attacked, sporting events, all sorts of situations, even crowds walking down a sidewalk, as we've seen recently, have been attacked at times. So it makes sense that any government institutions have to take a higher security posture.
Starting Monday, visitors will have to place all personal items onto a tray for X-ray screening and then walk through a metal detector. The city says to avoid delays, don't bring any prohibited items to the building, like sharp objects, weapons, noisemakers, and large signs. But not everyone thinks these new security measures are needed.
Well, I definitely do think it's too much. Anytime I've gone into that Service Ontario, there is a really big line, and that's supposed to be a public service that's available for folks. I don't think it really makes sense to be putting a bag check and metal detectors and that whole slow process in front of that. That's not to mention just public washrooms.
Other security measures like the metal bollards are already in place outside the perimeter of the building, and that's to prevent vehicles from accessing property at City Hall. Patricia.
A little skate on the Rink of Dreams in the winter. You want to go in for a warm-up? It's going to be different for sure. All right, CTV's Kimberly Fowler live for us tonight. Thank you.
At the CHUM Hospital, for some, it's bring your own tissue. I saw this report on TV, so I decided to bring my own, she says. While it might seem like an odd way to save money, staff have had to console crying patients and families by handing them brown paper towel. We hid this employee's identity because she fears repercussions. We do the best we can because there are people who are in mourning or in pain, she says. We don't want them to have to worry about having to bring their own Kleenex on top of everything. The CHUM says we took this decision within our organizational framework with our teams and patients and with the spirit of good supply management. To illustrate the cost, I bought this box of tissues at a pharmacy for $1.50. With 82 sheets inside, that comes out to less than 2 cents per sheet.
With this kind of penny pinching, it has to be a problem of real financial situation.
Patients' rights advocate Paul Brunet says this is just the latest spending decision that has him embarrassed.
Shame is like pain. You only feel it once. So I don't feel it anymore because there's so much shame.
The CHUM says tissues are still available in certain parts of the hospital. But the health minister told CTV there are situations which aren't defendable. I'm demanding managers use better judgment. And the opposition agrees.
I can't imagine being somebody who learns that they have cancer and being handed a roll of brown paper.
It's really shocking. This lack of dignity for people who go to the hospital.
But while the tissue issue is drawing outrage from some, for others, it's better than the alternative.
Worrying about Kleenexes in the hospital is really not important. We have a lack of doctors, a lack of medical staff.
If they're going to be cut, I'd rather see Kleenex than staff.
In the latest budget, Quebec spent $3.9 billion on healthcare and social services. But now the cost of tissue is in question. Kelly Gregg, CTV News.
A string of collisions in the region has sparked concern about the ongoing impacts of impaired driving. A 28-year-old man from Sydney was charged after he allegedly struck 2 pedestrians on Tuesday. Officers saw signs he was intoxicated. A breath sample confirmed he was over the legal limit. Meanwhile, investigators are working to determine whether alcohol played a role in the Falmouth collision that killed 5 people nearly 2 weeks ago.
The rippling effect of impaired driving is incredible, and it just has to stop.
Despite advocates like Mad Canada working for years to warn of its consequences, they say it's a problem people sometimes take lightly.
The reality is people never think it's going to be them, but it's going to be somebody, whether it's your child, your partner, your parent. I mean, these have rippling effects on the entire family and the entire community. I mean, the community is going to be devastated by this for some time to come.
Constable Troy Redden works in the Halifax district and specializes in impaired driving cases. He removed 121 impaired drivers from the roads last year and booked 26 of them so far this year.
The main difficulty is basically the enforcement, locating and apprehending those individuals.
Both he and Sullivan say more enforcement is key.
The individuals have to have a fear that they will be caught, and the punishment that goes along with that.
And I think for all of us, it's about having conversations within our own families and with our friends about making the right choices and not driving impaired.
As we know, without enforcement, it's hard to say how many or how often people are driving while under the influence. But officials say communities can do their part by reporting it, calling 911 when they suspect someone could be impaired. It could help save lives. Todd.
All right, Vanessa Wright for us in Halifax this evening.
This is a terrible deal. It's not even a point of foundation
to start discussing.
But discuss it they did. A packed council chamber in Springwater Wednesday night as many turned out to hear from Barrie Mayor Alex Nuttall, who brought with him his recently revealed and controversial proposal to redraw boundaries between the two municipalities. The deal would see about 4,300 acres of Springwater land transferred to Barrie as part of Nuttall's push for more land for large-scale employers. In exchange, the city would provide water and wastewater services to about 450 acres of land in Springwater. Other components include the creation of an economic development committee, adding the Springwater Mayor to the Conservation Trust for Little Lake, and an expansion of access to Barrie recreation facilities, including 500 waterfront parking passes.
It's a bad deal. At the end of the day, it's $1 billion that they want to take from Springwater Township.
The conversation at points even going so far as to question the mayor's integrity.
Not to point fingers, but it is in bad faith. We should have never received this.
While others had many questions on what has been put forward so far.
How many individual homeowners is it? What's the annual taxation number that is currently coming from those properties? Understanding, again, lots of numbers been thrown out there, but I've never seen an actual figure.
While the framework for the deal was only recently formed, Nuttall has been pushing to expand Barrie's size for about 18 months. There was much discussion Wednesday on when those conversations really took place, though, with some questioning if the mayors had the proper authority for those conversations without council direction, both taking strong umbrage.
I don't need authority from this council to have conversations with neighboring mayors, with county colleagues about various issues that impact our region and our residents. I'm elected to do just that.
We had, many conversations, but I wouldn't go to my council until I'd had those conversations. I don't need permission as the chief executive officer of the corporation of the city of Barrie, of our board of directors, if I could speak to another chief.
Susan O'Donnell says there's nothing her dog Ryder enjoyed more than his nightly walk, but it's his last walk she'll never be able to forget.
They just attacked my boy, and I just knew that he would probably not survive.
O'Donnell, who didn't want to appear on camera, was walking her dog across 6th Street and Dufferin Avenue when 3 pit bulls escaped from the backyard of this house and charged at Ryder and her.
I didn't have time to do nothing. I just froze, picked him up, tried to pick him up, but the dogs came at me, and knocked me down and got a hold of my boy.
Melanie Kenny lives 2 doors down and says the dogs have been a growing concern the last 3 years with plenty of close calls.
Every morning and every afternoon, I am worried a child will be fatally attacked.
Other neighbors told CTV they don't let their kids down that street, and some have stopped walking their dogs altogether for fear of what could happen. Kenny says she has talked to the landlord who owns the home where the pit bulls live and has been told the tenant is being evicted at the end of the month. If that doesn't happen, she plans to protest with other neighbors outside the home to make their message loud and clear.
If something happens to a child, I can't go to myself, I should have done something. I'm doing something, and I'm making sure this happens. And if it doesn't happen, I have a strategy.
A friend of the neighbors says he was over at the tenants helping him pack. He later found out from video surveillance he didn't latch the gate properly, and that's how the dogs got out.
I wasn't sure, trying to replay everything in my head if I'd put both locks in, and I honestly feel horrible with myself.
O'Donnell says she's been overwhelmed at the support she's received, and laws need to be changed to prevent this from happening to someone else.
It's just been traumatic. It was the most traumatic event I've been through in my life.
Saskatoon Animal Control is aware of the attack and is investigating. Keenan Sorakhan, CTV News, Saskatoon.